I'm living in New York. I have not left the area since. I lived in California ever since because I just found it to be home for entrepreneurial innovation, for intentional wealth building, for just exciting ideas to take root and to drive forward.
And we're back with another episode of Why Y'all Working. I'm one of your hosts, Alerja.
Michael Ogusenya.
And we have a very special guest to here with us today, Morgan Keim. He's a strategic powerhouse who's helping founders build cash flow and generational wealth backed by multifamily real estate. He has a background in operations, global strategy, and he's been advising high-income individuals and executives all across the world. Morgan really does help entrepreneurs and career executives turn their paychecks into property portfolios. So what we're going to be talking about today is not just about building wealth, but building a legacy. So hopefully we get to unpack all the systems, the mindset, and the strategies behind his mission to make real estate accessible, scalable, and deeply intentional with that. So thank you, Morgan, for joining us today. And welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. And you nailed it, right? Saying legacy. I mean, the name of the show is Why Y'all Working. If not for legacy and creating generational wealth and taking care of the ripple effect of our family, what else are we doing here? So it's a great way to frame it up.
Yeah, thank you. And to get things started, Morgan, why do you work and what does it mean to you?
So work for me is all about freedom. It's about creating really the impact of not just personal freedom and family freedom, but also stewardship of the kind of impact that I want to have on the world. So for instance, let me give an example because that feels a little abstract to say, but I've had a career 10 plus year in the venture-backed startup food tech space, sort of adjacent to biotech and food tech. And I drove into this whole career basically building a legacy around an external mission of getting animals out of the food system, creating better plant-based meat and dairy products that made consumers have comparable choice if they wanted to maybe have something that was like a plant-based burger and not have the beef burger with a better environmental footprint, better animal welfare, that kind of thing. And it dove me into the world of high growth venture backs with hundreds of millions of dollars on the line in these big pre-revenue raises. And so it's an interesting question. Why did I work? Why do I work? Because for a very long time, I put a lot of emphasis on I work as a conduit for good to evolve the food system to be more sustainable and more equitable. Now, at the same time, I'm a person. I have a family. I have 2 young daughters, 4 and 2-year-old daughters now. And the evolution of me as a person has caused an evolution of the reason for why I work. Where it used to all be about this kind of external mission, it's become a little bit more about foundational and generational building and freedom of time, freedom of intention. The freedom to say no actually is probably the most powerful one. So I remember this moment where I had just started, we just had our first baby. I was on a flight to Boston for a company that I'd helped to start. We had just raised more than $100 million Series A. It was the largest Series A in our space at the time. It was my 3rd flight that month. I live in Southern California. That's like a 6-hour flight. And I'm just ping-ponging back and forth, right? I should be all stoked, should be all happy, oh my goodness, we're going to change the world. And to some degree I was. But at the other side of it, I remember looking down at LAX on that JetBlue flight. By the way, Sunday, of course, because you got to be there for the Monday morning meetings. And I'm like looking down. I know my wife is at the beach. My friends are all hanging out. And I just realized I'm flying away from everything that I love to pursue this external path. And this is not sitting right. This is not the right mission for me. This is not the reason why I should be working to pursue something that's kind of out of my control. And so I really had this major recalibration moment. I remember on that flight, it was painful, especially at the culmination of just raising this money and going to do all these things and the expectations that the venture folks put on you. But a lot of things changed for me. And over the course of the next few years, I started to really look at alternative ways of living life where I could have more personal freedom, not just create good income and have this big paper net worth that tied to startup equity, but creating passive cash flow, tax advantage, leverage around something that was a little more tried and true. And I found that vehicle in real estate that allowed me to ultimately live with more intention, more freedom. And now I really see kind of actually my calling is to help others have that freedom too, and to create opportunities for them to create control in their own lives away from the stock market, away from things I can't control, and into things that are more graspable and aren't such swing for the fence type strategies.
Yeah, just to double tap, I know we've spoken a bit, and I can just see, especially with this answer, like it's clear that you come off as a hard worker. Where do you feel like some of those values come from? Is it something your parents taught you, something you saw? How did you learn how to work?
Yeah, it's a great question, Michael. I mean, the hard work ethic is definitely a family thing. My dad started with the same company he retired with 37 years later, and he worked himself up the ranks of that company, big multinational company. He commuted around the world. I grew up in southern Connecticut, and he was on the Metro North, like 6 a.m. train into the city, 90 minutes there, 90 minutes back, 7 p.m., like for 18 years until I was out of the house and until he retired. It's just in his blood. So I saw that as a lead by example. And the difference I had though was, well, I want my conduit. I'm going to take that work ethic, but I'm going to drive it towards things that I personally care about, impact, mission, stewardship, both for my family and for things that I really kind of want to change using business as a force for good. My mom is also an incredibly hard worker, but in a different way. She's a little more scrappy, a little more entrepreneurial, find her way around some angles, try something new and different. And so I kind of combined the two of them together as this like entrepreneur, think different, but also like have the discipline and the consistency to do what you say you're going to do, to show up when it gets hard, to make sure that you're the man or the woman of your word, and what you're trying to do. So that's always been really important to me.
Awesome.
Yeah, and leaning off of that, let's rewind a little bit. You grew up in southern Connecticut. Let's talk about that a little bit. Connecticut is one of my favorite states. I actually grew up around my aunt's house most of the time during the summers in Naugatuck and then in New Haven. She worked for DOJ. So love that area, love Yale, love all that community. Mm-hmm. But definitely want you to tell us about how was life when you were growing up? What does that look like in terms of how you ended up in California and working with the companies that you did there? Tell us what that was to you and how that kind of crafted your journey to leading to that major recalibration or midlife crisis, if you will, and understanding what that is.
Absolutely. Growing up in Connecticut, we're in the exurbs of New York City. It's a safe community, relatively affluent. I was kind of in an upper middle class household. We were definitely not like top of the food chain in that area. It was interesting for me because I recognized it from a young age that there were opportunities, but there was also a very prescribed path that people that come from my upbringing tend to follow. They follow in their parents' footsteps. They do commute into New York City and kind of take the same handful of financial type jobs or, corp development type of jobs. And from a pretty young age for me, I just knew that wasn't going to be my path at all. I actually left the state when I was 14 and put myself in a boarding school in Massachusetts, 3 hours away, thinking, oh, this is going to be totally different. It was like Connecticut on steroids, mind you, but at least it had the spark of an idea that I wanted to live in a different way than kind of my upbringing. So from there, graduated out of boarding school, went down to Charleston, South Carolina for school. I rejected the notion of going to like any of the New England Ivies or any of that. I just wanted something super different. And I got super different. And it was like the best 4 years of my life. Going from this very different background, showing up, Southern hospitality, very different type of people. And I found that I could really follow passion there, that I didn't have to fit a mold of this New England society kid that has to be this way. I could really be whoever I wanted to be. Now, at the time when I graduated, it was in the financial crisis, mind you. There wasn't a lot of opportunity unless you wanted to work in the hospitality sector there. And so it took me about a year to land a job and to really get my first big career break. So what I did is I basically said, you know what, like, I know I want to pursue something in marketing communications. I know I want to work in sustainability. And again, very different than what I do today in helping real estate, but a lot of commonalities in the service mentality. And so I ended up starting a consulting firm, working with, I think we had about a dozen clients doing digital marketing, a lot of companies that hadn't set up their websites, their ad strategies, just whatever you had to do to make it happen during like 2010, 2011, when it was tough out there. And eventually, one of the companies I was applying to took notice, got me an offer out to Santa Monica, California. And ever since then, I thought I'm going there for 6 months. I'm going to transfer to the New York office. I'm living in New York. I have not left the area since. I lived in California ever since because I just found it to be home. for entrepreneurial innovation, for intentional wealth building, for just exciting ideas to take root and to drive forward. And so that's kind of what landed me out here.
Definitely want to get into the LA, California, Southern California tech scene. Was just over there a couple weeks ago. But that's just a teaser for those listening. Larry can bring us back in.
Yeah. So, okay. So I would say your definition of success has changed over the years,
Yeah.
right? Since 2011, going to start this consulting firm, but even before then, you leaving home at 14, making that decision to go to that boarding school. I'm sure Michael could talk about that, right? Like even talking about boarding school in and of itself, I'm sure that was quite the culture shock for you, even if it was, a couple states away. Can you explain why the decision that you made in terms of going to the schools that you did helped you kind of decide that California may not be that much of a challenge for you in terms of leaving the East Coast and going to the West Coast, which is 3 hours behind the East Coast, right? And living on that kind of, or living within that. I don't really know what the mindset is because I personally have not been there, right? But I know that on the East Coast, we're all hustling, this mentality of hustle, hustle, hustle hard, kind of, every day we're considered to be the kinder, but yet stone coldish, more personality. And then on the other side, it's not so much that. So can you explain a little bit of how that kind of played a role into the relationships that you were able to build, the family that you were able to build, and how that kind of, again, evolved your definition of success and what that means?
Totally. Yeah. So it's actually pretty simple. My dad instilled a notion that in any major chapter of life, you should consider living in a new place and see how it goes. It was pretty simple advice. And I just happened to follow it. I followed it in high school. I followed it in college. I followed it after college. I even followed it to some degree when I had my first child and we moved to Orange County outside it from Santa Monica. So, that really drove a lot of that. But I think a lot of the notion too is that I just wasn't looking for the traditional path. I felt there's an identity statement I had to make in finding my own way. And the first vision of that was this, this external sustainability notion, this thing that I threw myself into for, more than a decade before I realized I had kind of gotten to the highest ranks of what I wanted to do there. And I had achieved a major groundswell. People actually knew the thing that when I told people out of my MBA program, I'm going to the food tech sector, everyone's like, why aren't you going to McKinsey? Or why aren't you going to this marketing company? It was so different. Oh, these schools are feeding like 10, 20% of their graduates into startups that are trying to change the world. But the difference is now what I've learned in the last, especially 5 years, is even with the external mission kind of being realized, even with really good active income, there was so much damn volatility of net worth and on paper, and you're 1 in 10 of a venture backed companies. You're in a venture backed math program where 1 in 10 is going to make money and 9 in 10 are likely going to crumble. And that wasn't the right risk reward profile for me at all. It wasn't the right for my family. And I wanted to go to something that's like 9 to 10 out of 10. So, back to the story of like, I'm on this flight to Boston that year. I had really sunk into learning about real estate. And I really sunk into digging into like contrarian plays, not just following like where people are. Let's go buy some, multiplex in Austin, Texas or whatever, but looking at like what's like underinvested today and what also still has a mission drive around solving the affordable housing crisis. Because my main career was all about, well, let's use business as a force for good. We're going to get animals out of supply chain and give somebody a better product. Now this could be my wealth building career also for good. Why does it have to be mutually exclusive? But yet it can be one side of your barbell that's safe and consistent and returns, while on the other side, you got your high risk startup and your big swing for the fence play. Why do we have to be so binary and just build one or the other? And so that was a lot of the evolution of what came.
This is a great segment into segment 2. So appreciate you, Morgan, for explaining your background and your story. Michael, as always, this has been a great first segment of Why Y'all Working. I'm one of your hosts, Lerje. And Morgan, thank you again for joining us. We'll be right back.